11:49 hours, August the 6th of 2024. This is going to be a Q&A audio with myself about the heart, as there are definitely some questions I want to go ahead and answer. I've talked a bit about how the heart works, what it does, and why it does what it does. There's some disambiguation to do, though, because I've talked about the heart, I've talked about source in that way, and the question at play, well, there's actually quite a few of them. But the first one that I'm going to ask is, what's the difference between the heart and source? And put simply, there is no difference. They're the same thing. So why do I use the words differently then? Like, why do I use source for some things and heart for the others? There are two components to this. One of them is there's an old way of thinking that I use with respect to the heart and following the heart. And so I use the word, and I use the heart in context of that a lot. When I say follow the heart, there's the heart's desire. What your desire at your core is. What are you excited to explore? You could have an array of pieces of consciousness set up before you, creating a certain theme, with all those elements, and then you go ahead and explore with those elements. Okay, so you try, one variation on that theme, and then curiosity takes you to want to try another variation on that theme. Take the idea of buying a new supercar. You do some things with it, and then you become curious about what else it can do. Or let's say you're with someone who is very close to you on a soul level, and you're in the fifth density. You go ahead and live out a portion of life with that individual and really enjoy that experience. Now you want to go ahead and try a different experience. So it's almost like the story starts over again, and then you take it in a different direction. It's a little bit like that, where the love of consciousness and your love for, your love focus on a specific piece of consciousness in the moment drives you to want to explore it and do different things with it. And in that way, you experience your connection and connectedness with it. And that experience expresses in a multitude of different ways and as a multitude of different things. So that's kind of what we're looking at when it comes to this idea. So the heart's desire is source's own curiosity, the thing that drives experience to be had in the first place. So when we say follow the heart, does this mean source is going to tell you something and you do it? In a way, yes. There are two ways to exist as an entity. There's existing as a type 1 being, where your mind and your source are integrated into each other and are operating as one, as a single unit. And the type 2 being, where the mind and the source are operating a little bit more like separate units. And this is kind of new territory for me, exploring this construct in quite this way. So let's see if I can nail it on the first try. When we're looking at the idea of the type 2 being, what exactly is type 2 being in this way? When we look at type 2 being, we're looking at the mind and the heart and the mind's wants, not always matching the heart's wants. So when we say minds wants, hearts wants, how exactly does this work? The heart, as in source, sees all of the ways in which consciousness can be. The mind does not have to see all of those ways. Life and consciousness, source, expressing as life itself in all of its pieces, in all of its groups of pieces, and as the entire group of pieces, does exactly what you have it do. And you can believe in it in a limited sense to only be able to do certain things. You can believe in life to be limited or to be a single specific group of ways, or have a single set of dynamics to it that it adheres to. And then you have to go ahead and treat life based on that dynamic in order to get along. From Source's own perspective, in your innermost understanding, you see that life is limitlessness and has the capacity to be whatever you have it be. And there's an integration of this awareness that can be felt if you're open to feeling it. If you've tapped into the portion of yourself that feels it, or if you're aware that you do feel it, depending on the circumstances and the way you've set up your consciousness. In that way, all conceivable knowledge of your moment and of all moments is available to you. And you can live that availability or not at your choosing. In this way, you can set yourself up for an adventure of survival and live that, and have to work to survive and to get by. And this is a common practice in many portions of being. So that's a description of some of what Type 2 being is. There's a lot more of Type 2 being than just that. That's the Type 2 being with which I am most familiar. But any Type 2 being is basically where the mind is not integrated or matching the full scope. Like, it's not integrated into or matching the full scope of Source's wisdom. Even if it's only experiencing a small piece of it at a time, the awareness and alignment with it is what makes Type 1 being. And the misalignment with that is what makes Type 2 being. And when we say misalignment, we do not mean this in a negative sense. Source does not like or dislike. It simply loves all things. That's the most fundamental expression of it. It has the capacity, however, to express as anything, including that of like and dislike. In that way, all conceivable expressions and experiences and types of being are there to be experienced from the perspective of the self or from the perspective of the other at your leisure. Since you are that source, you are able to like or dislike from the perspective of your own self, and you are able to like and dislike from the perspective of the other. And when I say the perspective of the other, there's yourself, as in the individual within your reality that you directly experience, and then the other individuals in your reality. So that's kind of how that works. That's what I'm looking at when I'm talking about this. This is how vast the expressiveness of Source is. Try to imagine every conceivable variation on that, both in this set of physics and this set of time, time dynamics, and in every other conceivable sets of physics to things and time dynamics. this will take you into areas of consciousness vastly different from the ones that are known here on Earth, and even into areas of consciousness beyond the galaxy, beyond this universe. It really shows you just how vast creation is, and all of the different ways in which consciousness can express itself. So now that you've seen those areas, now do variations on each of those areas. Try a place that's almost that has a completely different dynamic, almost like it's not gravitational in its nature. Look at that world and live it. It's more than a world. Look at that universe, if you will, that realm, and live in that realm for a little while. And now that you've lived in that realm, now live in it again, except differently. And keep trying different variations on the themes. Be each of the creatures in that realm. Be each of the types of life forms there. And with each individual life form, live different themes. And that shows you how incredibly vast consciousness is, because in each of these realms, there could be few life forms, there could be many. Few types of life forms, many. And in one of these realms where there's few life forms, you could live a variation of it on it that then has many, and a variation on it that has few, infinitely many variations of each of those, and live from each of the different perspectives in there as well. The idea that there's a limitless number of realms, enough to where any conceivable experience you could imagine, exists as part of creation. This gives you an idea of just how vast creation is, and just how many different things can be lived with the different elements of consciousness, and all of the different ways in which life can be lived as. All the different ways in which life can be lived. It's really endless. For every idea you come up with, there's another infinity of ideas. And that's consciousness for you. That is just how vast consciousness really is. And so when we loop this back to the simple question of following the heart, and what makes type 1 being and type 2 being, the one thing that remains constant in type 1 being is the integration into self, and the movement of the mind and the movement of the heart in complete unison, where the heart's want is the mind's want. The heart's desire for movement is the mind's movement. And the heart's connectedness is the mind's connectedness. And they're not fighting each other. They're moving totally and completely in unison. And that's the only difference between type 1 being and type 2 being. As in type 2 being, the mind doesn't fully see itself and everything around it. So, or perhaps it may be more appropriate to say it doesn't fully believe in itself and everything around it. So, there's that. I may have to go ahead and start over. I'm going to go ahead and do an intermission and just end part 1 of this audio. I'll have to make another part. That's the end of this one. 12:15 hours, August the 6th of 2024. So that's what we've been looking at with consciousness. So after we broke into detail, all of what life can be had to be, to give a little bit of a feel for just how capable Source is when it comes to expressing, and how big its entire body is to explore, its entire body of consciousness. You look at all of creation, all of that which is conceivable, all of the elements of consciousness can be combined to create. And that's what you get. You get creation itself, and you can explore any of it at a time. And that way you can have life be whatever you want, as big as you want, as small as you want. And that is what we're looking at when we talk about the scope of creation. Now, you can forget that it's you that are behind that. And then you start living from the perspective of the individual from which you live. And forget the grander scope of what's going on. That's what makes Type 2 being. The full, complete, total connectedness to it, and awareness of it, and integration into it is Type 1 being. And with that said, let's go back to the original question. What does it mean to follow the heart? What it means to follow the heart is to do the things that you want to do on the most fundamental level. So if you want to try a new variation on a theme, then you go do that. If you want to explore a new theme, you go do that. If you want to relax in the theme that you're in, you do that. If you want to keep playing with the variation of the theme that you're playing with, you do that. You're following a fundamental want that's way beyond physicality, way beyond the events of the rules of your reality. It's just what you most want to do. That's it. The next thing that I want to talk about with this is awareness. What is the scope of awareness? Put simply, this depends on which perspective you're looking through. If we look at my own fractal, my own entity, I have many layers to me. If you experience my own perspective from its ground level, what does my mind know? What my mind knows and experiences is somewhat limited. The grander scope of my being, the heart, my source behind this, the knowledge and understanding of that is limitless. It knows everything about my moment here and in all others. My own soul essence knows everything about all moments of me, and what the me that I'm living here from my ground perspective is a small piece of my soul perspective, where my soul perspective includes every conceivable expression of me, where you could look at another expression of me and recognize that's distinctly TAT. And you can see the matching signatures, even if the expression is of a reality with different physics. There's still something in the signature that you recognize. A little more than just something, but kind of a lot of things. enough to where you can tell it's distinctly TAT. Or perhaps something that calls itself TAT in another expression. And eventually you can start to see layers of consciousness, and we look at my oversoul level, that can express as a bunch of different things, and my oversoul family level can express as a whole lot more than my oversoul level. And you can start to see the areas of consciousness that each expression shares, that each expression is a part of. Is it part of, is that guy part of my oversoul? Yes. Is that girl over there part of my oversoul? No. Is she part of my oversoul family? Yes. And so that's kind of the thing that you can look at. Now, what about the soul, the individual soul? Well, this, I believe, would be the template layer self. The template layer is the 6th to 7th density exchange. Now we can go down that rabbit hole, so let's talk about that. This is the level of full integration of the higher fractal consciousness into the lower fractal consciousness. And I am going to go over what those two are, even though I go over those two in pretty much all of the videos on consciousness that I upload. But this time around, it's going to be a little bit different, and you'll see how. But when you're going up in the densities, what you're doing is you're moving consciousness from the higher fractal consciousness to be part of the lower fractal consciousness. And so in that way, the full entity is comprised of the higher fractal and lower fractal consciousnesses. And as you learn, as you live life, you feel more of yourself and quite literally integrate into yourself from the perspective of the lower fractal consciousness, the self being the full entity. So that's the actual act of putting consciousness from the higher fractal consciousness into the lower fractal consciousness. And right at the point where you've done all of that and consciousness is no longer tasked to be a certain way or do a specific thing that makes life have an element of physicality to it, you're at the template layer. And now you're looking at the scope of your entity, the thing that's distinctly you, and with all physical consciousness recalled, any conceivable physicality that can be had with your soul essence is available to be experienced. In this way, you're able to have whatever experience you want to, with any physics you want to, with any, character dynamics of reality that you want to, while your own individual character remains the same. And so there's that. So if you wish to go back down the densities, all you have to do is assign part of your full entity's consciousness to a specific task, to be a specific way, and therefore cause your reality to have a specific trait that it holds, so that consciousness becomes a certain way and stays that way. That's tasked consciousness. That's the higher fractal consciousness. So you take the perspective of your lower fractal consciousness. The higher fractal consciousness bees a specific way, and you basically set it that way, and you leave it there. And you could even forget that it's there, like not feel it anymore. And that's kind of the idea. You go ahead and set up a portion of your consciousness to be higher fractal consciousness, so that way you can enjoy experiencing the area of your reality that has those dynamics to it. And that allows you to have adventures rather than focus on creating everything. So there's another expression of what lower fractal consciousness and higher fractal consciousness are. So there's a little bit of the full entity and the soul essence, and what makes the individual soul essence different from the oversoul. And yes, the individual soul can express as many things, and those different expressions can coexist with each other. So one of the things about linear time not being a fundamental thing is that you can visit yourself. And a little Easter egg. If I'm not mistaken, the twin flame is that exact phenomenon in a way. So, and with that, some of you can logically figure out the little Easter egg about the twin flame phenomenon and answer a question, can there be more than one twin flame, for lack of a better term? Well, there's your answer. So, now that we've expressed that, kind of went that way because I got curious, but now, unfortunately, I've forgotten, the original line of thought. So we go back to the beginning again. Heart's desire. What does it mean to follow the heart? So we answered that question. You're doing what the deepest level of you wants to do. How do you know what that is? Well, that's just connectedness with yourself. The more you know yourself and feel what you want, the more you can go pursue it. And the way you create the character of your reality, there's many components to this, and some of those are, yes, the physics. Others are the things that tend to happen and the things that don't tend to happen. And yet others are what your mind knows and what it doesn't know. If you want to have a specific experience, that heart is not just your heart. It's the heart of all things. And when you want to go experience something, you can integrate into having that exact experience. So now that we've talked about lower and higher fractal consciousness, what about reality? How exactly does reality work, and what is its structure? Now, this is an interesting question to answer because look at everything around you. There are elements of life that you can learn to feel. There are elements of life that you have learned to feel, and elements of life that you may not necessarily have learned to feel from the perspective that you're living in the moment. And in this way, we go right back to the higher and lower fractal consciousness that we just addressed, where we talked about the idea of higher fractal consciousness being you task consciousness to be a certain way and you forget about it. Now you can unconsciously retask that consciousness to be different ways without realizing it. Remember what we talked about with the idea of reality being a certain way and the idea of surviving in that reality and forgetting that you're actually the man behind the curtains of that reality all along? Yes. This comes into play here quite a bit. And you can pick up different beliefs about how reality works and feel that reality, the conception of it, and integrate into that perception. Choose that as how you have life be. In effect, retasking your higher fractal consciousness. having life be a different way, all without really realizing that it's you behind that all along. Life can take some very interesting paths this way. And a lot of these paths might not necessarily be the paths that some people are aiming for. And others can be exactly what some people are aiming for. And it just seems like a miracle. And in a way, that's exactly what it is. Talk about Source expressing as everything, and Source being exactly as you have it be. The higher and lower fractal consciousness are two parts of that. And so, with the higher fractal consciousness being tasked to be a specific thing and the lower fractal consciousness being the rest, as you choose something, immediately the lower fractal consciousness moves into place, and everything works within the confines of how it's told to be, basically. And so in that way, that Source, or God if you like to call it, brings forth exactly what you've chosen to have as part of your being. Hence the idea of it being a miracle when things play out so perfectly in that way. So it's really kind of an interesting thing for me to think about. So in following your heart and doing the things that you want to do, you can choose to do the thing that matches your deepest desire. You could do the thing that matches your deepest desire, choose that theme. So we said that Source does what you tell it to do. How exactly does that work? Well, you choose an experience for yourself, or an experience ballpark or theme, and life integrates into that. So that Source is behind all of it. The part of it that you directly feel and experience, that's your lower fractal consciousness. The rest is the higher fractal consciousness. So these two work in unison. When you choose as your theme your heart's desire, you can choose anything as your theme, including things that are not your heart's desire. But when you choose something that is your heart's desire, when you choose in general, life moves with your choice of being. That energy, that idea, heart's desire, heart's being. I'm actually stopping for a moment to look at this. The heart and Source, they do as you tell it to do. It's the same thing. And the reason why I never said that the heart would, we go back to a question I think from a previous audio where I asked why I use Source in some instances and the heart in others. And one of them is because we say follow the heart, but the idea that the heart does what you tell it to do and can even do something that might not resonate with you, and then you follow it, that saying kind of falls apart there, doesn't it? And that's why. So you can actually tell Source, or choose a kind of being that's not what you want, but do so out of belief, having forgotten that you're the one behind the curtains. So you think that life is going to become something catastrophically hostile, and you'll have to prepare for that and fight to stay alive. And what's happening there? How exactly does that work? Well, there's a belief, and there's the choice of being in alignment with that belief, And because your heart is the heart of all things, and you've chosen this thing that you don't want as part of your being, um, the first thing that moves are all the things that are beyond physicality. So everything is primed to now think a certain way. Specific thoughts are a little bit more at the forefront, that are in alignment with this theme, for the self and for the others. And action is taken on that thought that begins the process of manifesting and expressing of that specific theme, that specific type of being in the reality. In that way, life is conforming to the physics that have been designated for it, and conforming to the character, and is now integrating into the choice of being that you've chosen for it within the rules that you've laid out for it. And it can do this in a way, again, that's chosen but not wanted. And that's how people could integrate into a more hostile version of Earth. Likewise, you can integrate into a less hostile version of Earth exactly the same way, where your being is their being is your being. It's like that with the more hostile version of Earth. It's like that with the less hostile version of Earth, because we are one, because we share that source. And one of the things that I noticed back in an event from the 25th was that exact phenomenon of their being and my being one and the same, where when they're likely to think something of me, or they're thinking something of me, I can feel it, because their thought is my being. It's my own being and belief that's at the heart of that. And that primes that reality to go that way. So from an empathic perspective, I sense it in them. From an empathic perspective, they sense the being in me, being that of imbalance. And in that way, what they then think subsequently that I can also sense is a reflection of my own self, just as my own being is a reflection of their self. And so I could see that oneness at play there. And when I let go of that and started being what I wanted to be, the being around shifted as well. So the simple question, does this work in real life? It can. If you're open to it being like this. If you're restricted, then, like, if you say no to it, ironically, yes, it works there too, because you're saying no to it, and it's following your own orders. It's following your own being, your own belief structure, what you conceive of and integrate into. You are that source being what you choose to be. In all of those moments, it's just a matter of recognizing the full scope of your choice, because the scope of the mind is a small portion of the scope of the rest of your consciousness. So it isn't about doing things with the mind. It's just about being. It's just about being in alignment with your heart's desire, with your source desire. And that is what kind of wraps up all of this. It's that oneness, it's that heart. So I could see the empathic phenomenon where I could feel the reality going a particular way, and then it went that way. And I could feel my own being at the heart of that. And I shifted it. Not even in response to feeling that. I shifted it just out of excitement. I was just simply naturally following my own excitement. And the life shifted. This is why it's so special to be, as people call, a heart-centered individual. It makes it easy to just slip into the life that you prefer to yourself, the life that you prefer for yourself. So life is as you have it be. Source does what you have it do. If you want to experience a specific theme or a specific kind of being, life around you will integrate into that. And so if you do so in alignment with your heart's desire, and you do that, you can always experience what you love. You can always have everything in place for what you love. And when you're open to the infiniteness in everything, and since Source is at the heart of everything, in a fundamental sense, everything is infinite because in its truest essence, it is that same Source as you are. You can start existing non-physically, can start existing incorporeally. You designate the physics of your reality. And again, the higher fractal consciousness and the lower fractal consciousness, the interplay between the two create this phenomenon. They create the phenomenon of physics and physical reality. So, if we're talking about creating your own reality, this is how that works. Works from that oneness. So I wanted to go ahead and break all that into detail to sort of answer the questions about the heart and life being as you have it be, and the heart doing what you tell it to do. And you can, with all of that, you can kind of touch on what I said as well. With the idea of just as we bow down to God, God bows down to us as well. In fact, you can take that a step farther. What's really happening there is God is bowing to himself from multiple perspectives. So there's that. That's the end of this one.